All right, there we
They're
go.
just sad they didn't get in on the shit eating.
Coming up in part 2.
Yeah.
All right, here we go. In 3, 2, 1. And
hold on. No, I'm good. We're good.
Should I keep recording? Okay.
And welcome to episode 456 of Cinematary. I'm your host, Zach Dennis, and I'm here with
Michael O'Malley.
And Andrew Swafford.
In today's episode, we're going to be talking about movies that we saw this week in part 1. And in part 2, we're all going to go through it, and we're going to talk about 1976's Salo, or the 120 Days of Sodom.
A movie that I have put on the Young Critics ballot for several years because I knew that the only way that I would watch it is if I made myself watch it. And here we are.
And this
year we are.
And this year we didn't even vote. We just decided to do it. And so now we don't, it's
the fascists we are.
Yeah. It is. It's gonna be one, y'all. It's gonna be one. All right, well, let's go ahead and jump into movies that we saw this week. I got 2 for us. The first one I watched, as you know, there's a number of offerings post Oppenheimer that are on the Criterion Channel related to the atomic bomb and its the reverberations of it in Japan specifically. And this one is Hiroshima Mon Amour. This one, definitely deals with the kind of the end of World War II and how it's ruminating through Japan, especially Hiroshima itself. But also has this it's kind of couched between this love story between a Japanese architect and a French actress. But this comes from it's from 1959. It's directed by Alain Resnais, who we've talked about before. I know we've talked about Night and Fog, his movie where he's going back to concentration camps and talking about the Holocaust and cutting in between that and talking about the Holocaust and like footage of the concentration camps at that period of time when he's filming. But this one, like I said, the story of it is, you have it's broken up into different sequences, but long conversations between this Japanese architect and a French actress who have met in Hiroshima. She's there filming a movie. He lives there, and they've just they met up somehow. You kind of catch them in media res, like they've already have hooked up once and are like now like it's the the morning after of just started kind of like talking to one another. But it takes place. I forgot what specifically. I want to say between 20 and 30 years after the bomb has dropped. No, not that far. It's 59, so probably closer to 20, but probably a little bit less.
Wait, what year was the bomb dropped?
45.
Yeah, so not that far actually. But anyway, so that's that is still reverberating through the town, but you have that along with them kind of sharing previous life experiences and romances and things like that. And so the first half of the movie I found to be really compelling. It's mainly leaning on his life experiences, and a lot of it is him. He was in the Japanese army. He wasn't at Hiroshima at the time. His family, you can kind of see him not necessarily directly engaging with it, but it definitely is something. Just the pitfall, like the fallout of the bomb is definitely like still very much intertwined with like his relationship with this city. And Renee does very similar to what he did in Night and Fog. Like the first half of the movie, he's cutting a lot between like them having like kind of them talking and in bed, and like sequences and images of days after the bomb had hit, the destruction of the city, people with radiation poisoning and things like that. And so you kind of have like this dissonance between this like budding romance and them talking about romance and life, and just kind of like the shadows, the ghosts of this town that are still kind of very much there and very much prevalent, even though they may not be like on the surface as much anymore. And there's in the first half of the movie really has this kind of haunting quality to it, because it's these two people who have fallen in love or whatever to a degree, have like found this connection, but there's there's just kind of this, as he's recounting like how he's gotten to this period in life, like there's just kind of this phantom that's behind him the entire time, that really like he it's still like tough at this period in time to like kind of wrap your head around what all of that meant. The second half kind of loses me a bit, I'll be honest. It focuses more on like her romances and her life experiences. I wouldn't say it necessarily like in like, I don't know. It's a little bit more compelling when like he's trying to kind of work through his life to this point, and you have like the atomic bombs drop on Hiroshima, and like how that's affected this entire community and this entire country at this point. And with her, it kind of is also, I think it's also trying to kind of somewhat make this connection between, people come from very different, places and very different, sets of problems and whatever, like very different places of life, and it kind of almost sets up like she's had all this stuff happen in her life that's led her to this, he's had all this stuff happen that's led him to this, and it definitely like is her kind of big crucial life experience that definitely had an effect on her, is that she was having this affair with a German soldier who was in France during the Nazi occupation, who she was having an affair with. And then I don't know if like her parents or somebody found out, but pretty much it's found out, and she's going to meet him one day. And I don't think they necessarily found out that they're they're connected, but she's definitely like going toward the place where they're going to meet. And he's like shot down by, whether it's British troops or American troops or whatever, like he's killed. And that has like this great effect on her. And I don't know, I'm fair. I'm open to being wrong, but I kind of was just like, you losing this lover who was a Nazi, is, I feel like, a little bit different than your whole city being bombed and nuclear radiation fuming from this bomb that initially killed, just a hair under 100,000 people, but then grew over time to be over 200,000 plus people. I feel like those are different. And like, I hear what you're saying, lady, but it's a little bit different. But
have you ever dated a Nazi and then not?
I guess not. I don't know. I was just,
we shouldn't be too quick to judge.
I was just kind of struggling with it, because I'm just like, I hear you, and that's really sad. I feel for you, but also, one, he was a Nazi, and then two, these are vastly different world events that are happening at this point. And I sympathize more with the guy who had his entire life disrupted by the dropping of the atomic bomb. But that's just me.
How much do you think that she knew he was a Nazi before they hooked up? Like, do you guys remember
how much did she know he was a Nazi?
Like before they were in the relationship, I'm imagining like maybe
he's
like
40% Nazi. I think we can still date.
The morning after, like looking up from the bed, and there's like a swastika on the bedside table or whatever, and she's just like, "Oh no."
Oh well, he's nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. It just kind of that kind of, we got toward the end of it, and I was just kind of like, like, well, I'm losing it a little bit here. I don't necessarily sympathize. Like, I sympathize, but at the same time, it's limited compared to like the stuff that he's kind of wrestling with in the first half. But I still think it's good. The Emmanuelle Riva is the French actress. She's very good in this role. And it is kind of like it was placed, Criterion put it on there as as just kind of like this, not counter programming, but like additional programming to Oppenheimer, where this very much comes from the mindset of like the perspective of people in Japan and in Hiroshima, compared to like Oppenheimer, which is very much like the American perspective in that whole situation. So
do they also have stuff by Japanese filmmakers as well?
they do. They have Kurosawa did a movie that's directly tied to the dropping of the bomb, and they have a number of other films that are by Japanese
I
filmmakers.
didn't realize that. What's the name of the Kurosawa movie?
I'll look it up for you later. But
sorry to put you on the spot.
No, I forgot what it's called. But yeah, I have not seen it either.
Rhapsody in August. Is that it?
Something with fear. It's something fear. I want to say. But yeah, Hiroshima Mon Amour, it's on the Criterion channel, but it's also it's a widely heralded French New Wave film. I'm sure it's pretty accessible to get to. It's probably at your local library or something like that as well. So it's worth checking out. The other one I'm watching is, again, barreling toward the end of the world, is AI, artificial intelligence. This is a part of Criterion. Again, Criterion Channel had this really great curated series of films about artificial intelligence. So it gave me a chance to rewatch After Yang by Kogonada, which I appreciated a lot more in a rewatch than I did.
Really good movie. People should watch that.
I really liked it a lot more the second time than the first time. So I recommend that one if you have not seen it. But the other one that they had that kind of sparked my interest was AI, artificial intelligence. Steven Spielberg. It's one of the Spielberg movies that I have not seen, so I thought this was kind of a good time to check it out. It came out in 2001. It came out in June of 2001, which is just good to like mark because one, Spielberg goes on a little bit of a shift after September 11th, but two, the third act of the movie, the Twin Towers prominently feature like when they go to this Manhattan has like become this like wasteland because it's completely underwater for the most part. And when they enter like this waterlogged Manhattan, like the Twin Towers are there like prominent, and you're like, like a couple months before. But yeah, so this is Spielberg 2001. It follows David, who played wonderfully by Haley Joel Osment, who is the first. They at this period they don't say what year it is, or maybe I don't think they do though. They don't say what year it is necessarily when the movie starts. But at this period in time, we've developed like artificial intelligence with like robots. And so you have a bunch of robots who perform a lot of different tasks. They talk a lot about like servant robots. Later on in the movie, you meet Jude Law's character, who he is like a pleasure robot. Like he's, a prostitute. Was it Gigolo Joe? Gigolo Joe. What do you know? That's his whole like.
Some of the names and like naming conventions in this movie rock, like the Flesh Carnival. Is that what it's called, or Flesh Fair?
Flesh Fair. Yeah, it's
Flesh
great.
Fair. I love that.
But David's a robot as well, but he is the first one that they've programmed to like take in and use his AI programming to like consider love. And so he's adopted by this employee of the robotics organization, and his wife, their child is sick. I think they kind of presume is probably going to die. And so they like kind of give him to this family as like a test case. And then, it's kind of tough as like he's working through his programming, and they're kind of like trying to react to this child robot. So like there's kind of like, the at the beginning, like the pitfall, like them trying to kind of work a relationship, and they do it. The wife, who's played by Frances O'Connor, who she's very good as well, is able to start kind of developing a relationship with David. But then their child gets better, and their child, who's played by the brother of who's the brother in Even Stevens, that just made me laugh. he like he's healed. He comes back home, and so then that like adds that whole dynamic of David, who was pretty for all intents and purposes was an only child, and then is becoming like this kid is like better again and comes home and like now has like a brother, and then David is just like, I was an only child and now this other guy's here who is their actual flesh and blood, who constantly is telling him that like he is an organic human and you're a robot type thing. And so the brother clearly wants to get David out of there, and so kind of leads him into a number of different situations that leads the family to go, we're going to get rid of him. And the mom doesn't want to go through with it because it's made clear if they're going to get rid of him, they have to take him back to this robotics company and they're going to destroy, they're just going to incinerate him. And so she like lets him go. Like this is when it kind of very much like starts to dip into the fairy tale allegory that's going on throughout this entire movie, where she just kind of dumps him in the woods. He has this called a super toy, this robotic bear named Teddy that is like with him.
I thought David was a super toy. Is that not the case?
They call him the super toy. I think the teddy bear is like specifically called a super toy because it is like it is reacting and can have conversations with the child.
Gotcha.
And so Teddy and David are pretty much just like left in the woods. And that's where they end up, Jude Law's character, he gets tied up with this murder. And so he tries to run away, but ends up getting caught up with David in the Flesh Fair, which is like led by Brendan Gleeson. That like they're like picking up robots, and pretty much it's just like all hell's loose, just like torturing and killing robots for humans' pleasure.
I have a very vivid memory of that shot where it's like going down a train track through this like big neon mouth thing that is also on the cover of some of the DVDs.
I was telling Michael before we recorded, like it's a really dark and kind of frightening and like depraved sequence that you forget this is a Steven Spielberg movie, and you're just like, this is crazy, like what's going on here. It's kind of like the island of misfit toys, but you're there and they're taking the misfit toys and torturing them and tearing them apart or blowing them up. It's very like sad and weird and depressing.
I remember watching it with my parents when it came out, like renting it at Blockbuster or something, and they turned it off at the Flesh Fair scene. I had to rewatch it on my own in college.
How old were you when that? Like, I imagine that must have been a really common thing where families like Steven Spielberg with the child actor. Like, this must be a family movie.
I would have been 9 when it played theatrically, so maybe 10 or 11.
Yeah, that movie would have been.
It's not a movie for a 10-year-old.
Yeah.
But anyway, they're able to kind of escape that. Anarchy kind of reigns because the crowd turns on the Brendan Gleeson character because it's clear that that David is like they feel as much more sentient than a lot of the other robots. So David, as well as Gigolo Joe, Jude Law's character, are able to get out, and that's when it becomes starts. It's a little bit of a play on the Wizard of Oz. They end up going to, I forgot what the city's called, but they go to the city to meet with Dr. No, who is pretty much this you pay to get advice robot that's voiced by Robin Williams, to find out. David is looking for the blue fairy because one of the the fairy tale that really like latched on for him was Pinocchio, and he wants to find the blue fairy who turns Pinocchio from a puppet into a real boy. And so they go to Dr. No. He gets the information that he needs, and of course, like the robot company is like searching for him and is trying to like take him back. And I'm gonna kind of, I don't know, I guess I can keep going. I'm trying to like, how much plot I want to like get into. Oh, just whatever. It's from 2001.
I mean, I think where the movie ends up going, plot wise and emotionally, is what I hear people argue about.
Yeah,
it is very well, and not irrelevant is the fact that this was initially supposed to be a Stanley Kubrick movie.
Well, that's what I was going to get to. This was a long time project of Stanley Kubrick. When Kubrick died, he had passed it off to Spielberg, and so Spielberg made it. And a lot of people argue over this because Steven Spielberg and Stanley Kubrick, while I seemingly very close friends, make very different movies.
Mhm.
And a lot of the kind of sentimental levels of this movie, people kind of go, oh, it's Spielberg, you know, playing nice over a more hardened Kubrick script or Kubrick project.
That was my assumption when I watched it in college.
Yeah, so kind of where it goes is you know, the Blue Fairy is less an actual, you know, it's of course not like an actual thing, and he ends up going back and kind of finding out that he's the creation of the creator, the CEO, the creator of this robotics company, who David is you know, the image of his lost son, or his son who died, or what, you know, he's like created David in that kid's image. But David ends up escaping and becomes frozen underwater because he goes to Coney Island and finds the you know, in the fairy tale land, the blue fairy from Pinocchio, and then becomes like encased because he literally goes 2,000 years without running into any other human forms until 2,000 years in the future, an alien. Again, just gonna kind of like leave it there. But yeah, I don't know. You can definitely feel the fingerprints of Kubrick on it. Like you can see where, just like in like the semantics, the logistics of like the whole artificial intelligence, like you can see him kind of getting into that. I disagree though that like Spielberg like cuts, you know, rounds the edges. Like I think it, like I said, just with the Flesh Fair, like it definitely has, it's pretty scathing and edgy a lot of the time. Like you definitely have that more sentimental, you know, you have that like parent-son relationship that you would expect from him. It's worth also noting, outside of the Kubrick thing, that this is the second movie that Spielberg wrote himself following Close Encounters, which also is like very much built off of like a familial relationship. And this is the second movie before his third movie, which was Fabelmans. So it kind of tracks with his writing record, like how he kind of crafts this movie.
I wonder what that means exactly, that this is a movie that Spielberg wrote himself, if it's a movie that was worked on by Kubrick for a long time and also adapted from a story before that.
Yeah,
that's a good question.
I mean, maybe there's an answer. I would say maybe it was something that like Kubrick, you know, Spielberg was kind of like, hey, you know, because of the nature of him taking the project, maybe it was kind of like he wanted to handle it himself.
I think like it's exaggerated the extent to which Kubrick had begun work on this movie. Like I think it was more of like a treatment or something like that. Because Spielberg has literally the only writing credit on the screenplay.
Yeah.
Which indicates to me that whatever movie we see now, he kind of worked on from the ground up, maybe like having like talked with Spielberg or something, or Kubrick or whatever.
Yeah, because you don't see the only acknowledgments of Kubrick is there's a special thanks to the Kubrick family near the end, and then he dedicates the movie to Kubrick. So, but you don't see like it's not like they have a producing credit or a writing or story credit or anything like that. But yeah, the ending is another, and that's where I think a lot of people argue, is they feel like Kubrick or Spielberg is just way too sentimental in the ending. The movie ends with, like I said, like he's been frozen for 2,000 years. The human race has become extinct or has morphed into this much more celestial alien form. It's, you know, it's not human beings as we're familiar with.
We're supposed to think those are humans.
I think it's kind of it's either they. I don't think it's really not giving us a sense either way, but it's clear that like either the human race has gone in that because of like artificial intelligence and robots has gone in that direction, or these aliens have just kind of come to Earth following the extinction of the human race.
That was what I assumed.
Something along those lines.
I'm looking at Wikipedia and it says that mecha have evolved into this advanced life form. Are mecha the robots?
Yeah.
Okay.
So
that's what Wikipedia says.
And that's why they're really fascinated with David, is they're like he's the only mecha, he's the only robot alive that has like interacted with flesh humans. Like at this point, none of them have interacted with that. And so they create this kind of reality for him that is his old house. And pretty much his only wish, you know, that he gives to the Blue Fairy is he wants to like be with his mom again. He wants to be with the Frances O'Connor character. But as they lay out, he can, but by nature of whatever technology or whatever, what have you, she'll only live from the time she wakes up to the time she goes to sleep. When she goes to sleep, she's gone forever again. And so the ending of the movie is like him playing out this day with her. And then at the end, she goes to sleep and he ends up going to sleep with her. Which I think, and then it kind of like fades out. And I think a lot of people read it as like, oh, like he got the day he wanted. Now he's asleep and that's it. And I'm like, no, I think he just died. Like she's dead now. He got what he wanted and then he died and everybody's dead now.
And even if he doesn't die, like what he got was like a simulacra of a mother, like for a day. Like it was not even like a real meaningful long-term connection. Like he waited 2,000 years frozen under this glacier.
Yeah.
And then got one day of like a fake mom.
Yeah, it's not sentimental. it's pretty bleak. And so I don't know.
Does it kind of trick the audience into making it feel sentimental, even if it's not?
Quite honestly,
truly?
I think the audience thinks it's sentimental because it's Spielberg.
I do think though, like if I'm remembering right, it's been a long time since I saw this movie, but if I'm remembering right, like the score and like the way it's filmed is very warm.
It is.
There's like a sense of, there's like a pervasive sense of irony throughout. Like if you're paying attention to what's happening, but if you're not,
there's definitely like a text and between the lines type. Like I don't think like Spielberg is definitely if a lot of times it feels like a Steven Spielberg movie. I don't think that's what he's saying the entire time though.
I also think Spielberg is like ironic in ways that people don't always give him credit for. Like there's like, speaking of Hiroshima, if you've ever seen Empire of the Sun, there's this really incredible sequence where Christian Bale's character sees the blast, like the flash of light from the atomic bomb, and he thinks it's some mystical, like amazing event. And it's like all those Spielberg tropes, so like the Spielberg face, like looking up in the sky and there's lights and all that, but it's like the atomic bomb. So I don't know. I think it is like a trope of Spielberg's to have that kind of pure sentiment, but it's also a really long-term trope of his to have like kind of baiting you with sentiment with something that's like kind of horrifying.
Well, and you think about like, I think also like our modern relationship with fairy tales, I think you have to kind of think is like this direct relationship with like Disney, like, Pinocchio or Little Mermaid or Beauty and the Beast. Like the Disney version of that is vastly different from like the origins of that fairy tale.
Which even the Disney Pinocchio is pretty dark by modern Disney standards.
Exactly. And so like, I think he's also kind of playing with that to a degree, because like I said, the whole thing is this fairy tale allegory the entire time. But I think he's also using that to kind of get into these really dark, lonely, just kind of hollowness of humanity at this point. I don't know. I'm maybe people are talking about it. I feel like people aren't talking about this movie enough. Like it's really an incredible movie. It's easily like top tier Spielberg. It's fantastic. It's on Criterion Channel. Well, we're recording this on the 31st, so we will be gone by the time this episode comes up. But it's a Spielberg movie. I'm sure you can find it like at whether you rent it or at the library or something like that. It's it's top notch. It's fantastic.
Yeah, I feel like it's like, like every band that's like kind of famous and popular and has a big fan base, they have the album that like people know and love from them, and then they have the album that the fans really love. I think like AI is like the like fan favorite Spielberg, as opposed to like whatever E.T. or Raiders of the Lost Ark. I gotta say though, Spielberg's got to return to this titling convention of having an acronym and then just having the acronym explained in the title. E.T. the Extraterrestrial, AI, Artificial Intelligence. Like, what's next?
Yeah, the Fablemans. My family was a little fucked up. Michael, you had a movie though. I'm gonna stop talking for a while.
So I saw this movie came out, at least around me. It was theatrically released earlier this year, but it's got a 2022 date on Letterboxd. But I saw Enys Men. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that right because it is a Cornish term that means Stone Island. And So this is a movie that is kind of marketed as a horror film that is set in Cornwall, which is not a subculture of the UK that I'm like particularly familiar with. But in this movie, it's set in the 1970s, I think 1973, and it's like set on this island off the coast of Cornwall. And I remember seeing the trailers for this movie, and it was kind of marketed like a Wicker Man type like folk horror thing. And that's not exactly what this is. Like, it's kind of a bait and switch for the advertiser, because what this really is like a nearly avant-garde movie about this woman's daily routine on this island. She's like part of I don't know if it's a research team or like a conservationist effort or something like that, but she's basically going to this like looking at this flora every day, and just describing in this little journal like what's happened with this flower that she's looking at. And eventually she starts looking at this lichen too, that's on this like kind of like mysterious looking like ancient statue. And eventually kind of like weird, unsettling, reality breaking things happen, but not in like very, boom, like, exciting ways. It's just like little subtle things where she'll see like a figure in the distance. She's not sure who that figure is. Or this character shows up, and this character kind of seems like she's her, but a younger version of herself. Or like you'll see her flip through a book and there's like a picture, and we don't really know what this picture is. It's kind of like the end of Repulsion type thing. Like really what this movie reminded me of, and why I was interested in talking about it, is it reminded me a lot of Skinamarink.
I was going to say, I remember it coming out shortly after Skinamarink, and the discourse online was very similar.
Yeah, it's like one of these things where it's like marketed as a horror movie, and it is horror adjacent, but maybe even less so than Skinamarink, or excuse me, maybe even more so than Skinamarink. It is a mood piece that is using certain stylistic conventions. In this case, like a really, really like thorough recreation of like 70s film grain, and like certain like colors, like red is really prominent. Like this woman has this red coat. This kind of looks like the coat that's really iconic in Don't Look Now. Wait, is that what it's called? Yeah. Okay.
Not the Bob Dylan Don't Look Back.
Well, and I almost said Don't Look Up, and I was like, wait, that's not right. There's a lot of don't looks. At any rate, the
new Cinematary series coming soon.
The Donald Sutherland
all the directions
movie
not
set in Venice. But anyway, so like
not there either.
This movie's kind of like a vibe piece about like, it's basically about this environment, this like kind of like what seems to be this kind of backwater, like starkly rural and insular Cornish environment, which I'm not familiar with Cornwall whatsoever. Like I recognize the name, but it kind of seems like almost like pastoral, but kind of like Wickermanish in the sense of it's this island that seems to have been like secluded for so long that like modernity has kind of skipped over it. And it's not a particularly scary movie, but it's a very textured and interesting movie. And I don't know, like horror movies are interesting because, or the genre of horror is interesting because like more so than like almost, in fact, more so than any other genre I can think of, distributors are willing to just like kind of go with weird vibey shit and like push it. Like this movie didn't get like, a Conjuring type release, but it got a wide enough release that it was released in like a good number of cities, like for the kind of movie that this is, like a essentially plotless movie about a woman watching plants grow.
It played at Regal Theaters in Knoxville.
Yeah, and I'm just like interested in that as a phenomenon. And you can go back to other things too. Like if you go back and watch like Paranormal Activity or the Blair Witch Project or whatever, which are much more accessible movies than this, but kind of doing the same thing, which is like in some ways like challenging audiences by baiting them with horror stuff, and then having a little bit of a gloss of horror, but really for long periods of time being kind of experiments in format. And I don't know, like it's just very interesting. Like for a lot of genres, they've kind of been boiled down to storytelling beats that are kind of agnostic about stylistic conceits. Um, a lot of Hollywood filmmaking has kind of eschewed this distinctive style in favor of like story, tropes like rom-coms or something. Like it's pretty rare to have a rom-com that's experimenting with style, like film style. Like most of the time, like it's on a screenplay level or like the kind of tropes of the genre. But like horror is like the one that retains like a dedicated interest in like we're doing weird stuff with the camera.
Because that's how you unsettle an audience or catch them
Yeah,
off balance in some way.
it must be. And I guess that's interesting because it allows stuff like Enys Men to exist, uh, and get a lot of people to see it. Even though it's the type of movie that you could very easily market as not a horror movie. In fact, you could market it as like a completely avant-garde. Like it's not hard to imagine like this being like a grass piece that gets like a MoMA screening or something like that. But instead it's this movie that was kind of pushed as a horror film like Skinamarink, but Skinamarink at least had like some jump scares and stuff. Like Skinamarink was trying to be scary, and I'm not convinced that Ennis Man is trying to be scary. It's like vaguely unsettling, but really it's just this like really sumptuously textured movie that is most interesting when you're just looking at stuff. Like you're watching these plants grow, or you're listening to water trickle, and it's all done with this like really heavy film grain, this kind of like color dynamic that is very it feels very much, I don't know what to describe it as, but it feels very like 70s film color dynamic where these colors are kind of like almost like feels like they're bleeding a little bit through the film grain, a bit like really bright colors.
Do you know if it was shot on celluloid?
I want to say that it was. It certainly looks like it. Oh yeah. So I'm looking at Wikipedia. It was shot on a 16 millimeter.
Oh wow.
And a lot of it too doesn't have synchronized sound. That's another thing too. They have sound playing over the movie, but that doesn't match like what's on the screen. And it's not like characters are having conversations because it's really just this woman. But a lot of it is like very soundscapey, like where because they filmed the 16 millimeter, it's not like that they're like capturing like a bunch of audio like in the environment. And so you have this very clear like dubbing and very, very clear like playing with like these collages of sounds in like over these kind of landscape photo, or not photos, shots. Anyway, like if any of that sounds interesting, like if you were a fan of like that sort of vibe thing, and I really do want to stress, like it's pretty close to being just like a straight up avant-garde movie. Like it's not plotty whatsoever. I saw some people on Letterboxd compare it to Men, the Alex Garland film, and I guess like in terms of setting, it's not that different. Like a kind of secluded, rural, like UK ish thing, but like otherwise, like it has none of the silly like uh stuff that Men does with regards
people
to
just think all men are the same.
Yeah, and there is like maybe a gender thing going on here. Like there's, I don't know, like it's very opaque, and again, like it doesn't seem to be that interested in like big grand stylist, like big grand thematic like gestures as in like communicated through a screenplay. In fact, like I mean, there's maybe an argument to say that it's really more of like a environmental piece about this area of Cornwall. Like the movie was distributed, like advertised in Cornish in certain areas. For example, like if you go on Wikipedia, the UK theatrical release poster that they have has all of the credits listed in the Cornish language. And so like there is like almost like an anthropological or like ecological interest in like just environments and subculture and that sort of thing. That again has nothing to do with the kind of like unsettling stuff that happens in it. That's only mildly unsettling. Anyway, it's just like an interesting movie, and like I don't know, for as much as like theatrical distribution seems like really in the toilet now, especially with the strike in the theater or the studios kind of just torpedoing their release schedules on purpose. It's weird that this got a theatrical release, and I don't know. I'm not super hopeful about theatrical distribution, but it would be kind of fun if like mainstream theatrical distribution cratered and all that we had was like weird stuff like this, like bouncing around the remaining theaters.
Yeah. If theaters just needed stuff to put on screens and they were putting up weird shit.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, that's maybe what happened with this one. I'm not sure what happened that this got as big of a push as it did, but
well, speaking of weird shit to put on the screen, if you need something, theaters, have we got a weird thing for you?
Oh boy.
Coming up in part 2, we're going to talk about Salo, or the 120 Days of Sodom.
We sure are.
After this.
Another movie marketed as a horror film. Maybe more appropriately.
I hope you were done. I just felt like that was a good transition.
No, it was. I was running out of things to say, especially because, again, there's not a lot of textual stuff to talk about with that movie.
Okay. Oh. I'm looking at the Letterboxd list I made for this episode, and like the poster of Hiroshima Mon Amour has a woman crying on it, and then the Salo poster is a woman crying, and they're just bookending one another.
Amazing. I love those Letterboxd lists where like it's about like creating a collage. Like, what's that Letterboxd list that's like all the movie posters like organized by color? Have you guys seen that one?
It amazes me how people will take lists that are insanely long, thousands of movies long, and organize them by the specific part of the color spectrum each.
Yeah, especially because sometimes the posters change.
Yeah, that seems like it's too much upkeep.
Do you remember that list?
I'm gonna go get a beer to talk about Salo.
Go ahead.
Do you remember that list of where I think the name of the list or something like movie posters that are funny to me or something like that?
I do. Isn't that PD 186 or whatever that person?
Yeah. I'm pretty sure. But like, oh God. I remember reading that person was. Whoever made the list was like griping in the comments about how sometimes the posters would change and the new posters weren't that funny anymore.
I'm looking up it's PD 187 for anyone who happens to be watching this YouTube. Yeah. There were some really good ones in there.
Oh my gosh. Some of them, that's such a funny list.
Funniest posters to me is what it's called. Let's see. What are the funniest posters to me though?
Yeah, hold on. I gotta pull this up.
The Adventures of Dally and Spanky. It's a small dog on a small horse.
I think. Hold on.
George Bush Goes to Heaven.
The Da Vinci Co-ed, I think, is very funny to me.
Oh my gosh.
Hold on, where's the ghost dog one? The ghost dog one was very funny.
Is it My Magic Dog?
No. There's like a dog that's actually a ghost or something.
Da Vinci Co-ed has a very funny poster.
There's a lot of them involving dogs. Oh man.
Can you believe that? Can you believe that in the year of our Lord 2023 that they're still making talking dog movies like they did with Strays, starring Jamie Foxx?
Just make them cuss, and that'll do it. That's all you need.
That's the innovation. Is like now since the kids don't go to the movies anymore, we're just gonna make hard R versions of everything.
It was like let's make Homeward Bound again, but they'll cuss. And I'm sure like a dog humps a leg and there's like a dog penis or something grotesque,
Well, there's like a whole sequence in the trailer that I was forced to see many, many times that they're like humping garden gnomes or something, aren't they?
See, there you go.
Yikes.
Yeah, I don't know.
There's a on this funniest posters to me, there's a poster for a Ricky Gervais special called Humanity. That is quite funny.
Is that the one when he like is dressed like Jesus on the cross?
No. He's just like making a insane face at the camera, like he's a vampire and he's about to suck my blood. And it says humanity in big text, but he's also wearing a hat that says humanity on it.
Hold on, I gotta find this.
It's incredible how hard he works to not be that funny.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, and this picture is like obviously like digitally touched up too. Like it looks like a Snapchat filter or something.
Man, this list is what I needed before getting into Salo.
It's like a wonderful list to return to every once in a while. Like there's just some good shit on there.
What is this movie titled Hitler from 2007?
So it seems self-explanatory.
What isn't it? You know? It's like the Ridley Scott movie that he's doing about Napoleon, except they did it about Hitler.
Wow. Okay, I will tear myself away from this list. It's too funny.
I talked to I was messaging with Brian yesterday because I was seeing if he was going to be in Toronto again, and he will not.
Oh, did he go to Toronto last year?
Yeah, he was there last year. He and I met up because he and I met up for the first. We'd never seen each other in person until last year.
Oh yes, that Brian. Sorry, well, I don't know
Brian
why
Welch.
I was thinking of someone else. So he's not going.
No, he said that they've had cutbacks in the strike because there's just not so it's a bunch of stuff.
Wow.
But he said
no cutbacks to Cinematary.
No, we're fully staffed. Well, actually, we're going to be letting Michael go, but we'll let him get back before we let him. No, but he said he interviewed a producer from that Louis C.K. documentary.
Oh yeah.
And I don't know. He was kind of like throwing water on it, kind of like, there's nothing like super revealing or shocking out of it. But I was just like, I don't think that's what I'm really looking for. I'm more just kind of curious about like the whole like thought experiment of it.
Yeah, I think he is a really interesting case study. So I'm curious to see what that turns out like.
Yeah,
if we get to see it.
You ready, Michael? You ready to dive in?
I'm ready.
All right, here we go.
All right, wait. What's the thing in Twin Peaks: The Return? Are you ready to shovel the shit? Like, hold on, what is it? That
shovel your way out of the shit.
That's right. Are you ready?
That's what we're gonna do.
That's it.
Here we go. In
wait,
3.
Hold on. I'm not ready.
3.
Okay, I'm ready.
3, 2, 1. And we're back with part 2 of episode 456 of Cinematary. In this part, we're going to be talking about or continuing our Young Critics Watch Old Movie series with 1976's Salo, or The 120 Days of Sodom, directed by Pier, Paolo Pasolini, from a script by Pasolini and Sergio Citti. The film stars Paolo Bonicelli, Giorgio Cataldi, Uberto Paolo Quintavella, and Aldo Valetti. A group of fascists round up 9 adolescent boys and girls and subject them to a 120 days. Well, that's not grammatically correct. They subject them to physical, mental, and sexual torture for 120 days. Pasolini's writing collaborator Sergio Citti had originally been attached to direct the intended adaptation of Marquis de Sade's The 120 Days of Sodom. During the creation of the first drafts of the script, Pasolini appealed to several of his usual collaborators. But while collaborating with Citti on the script, he was compelled to transpose the setting of Salo from 18th century France, which is where it's depicted in the original book, to the last days of Benito Mussolini's regime in the Republic of Salo in the spring of 1944. Salo is a toponymical metonym? I don't know what that means for the Italian Social Republic, because Mussolini ruled there from this northern town rather than from Rome, which was a puppet state of Nazi Germany. While writing the script, it was decided between Citti and Pasolini that the latter would direct the project, as Citti had planned to write a separate project after completing Salo. Pasolini noted his main contribution to Citti's original screenplay as being its Dante-esque structure, which Pasolini felt had been de Sade's original intention with the source material. In the film, almost no background is given on the tortured subjects, and for the most part, they almost never speak. Pasolini's depiction of the victims in such a way was intended to demonstrate the physical body, quote, as a commodity, the annulment of the personality of the other. Specifically, Pasolini intended to depict what he described as an, quote, anarchy of power, in which sexual acts and physical abuse function as metaphor for the relationship between power and its subjects. Aside from this theme, Pasolini also described the film as being about the, quote, non-existence of history as it is seen from Western culture and Marxism. Franco Merli was considered to be a prototype of the Pasolinian boy. Ezio Mani remembers during filming, quote, the same with Franco Merli, the guy chosen for having the most beautiful butt. When they reward him by holding a gun to his head, he suddenly protested. He couldn't handle that scene, and the assistant director had to go and give him a hug.
How many times did people need a hug after filming a scene in this movie? I feel like that couldn't have been the only time.
That's probably true. The shooting, carried out mainly in the 16th century Villa Gonzaga Zani in Villampinta in the spring of 1975, was difficult and involved scenes of homophilia, coprophagia, and sadomasochism. The acts of torture in the courtyard caused some of the actors to suffer abrasions and burns. Actress Helene Sergeri described the film shoot as, quote, unusual, with nearly 40 actors being on set at any given time, and Pasolini shooting, quote, enormous amounts of footage. She also
noted the unusual part?
Yeah, that's the unusual part. She also noted the mood on the set as, quote, paradoxically jovial and immature in spite of the content. In between working, the cast shared large meals of risotto and also had football games played against the crew of Bernardo Bertolucci's Novecento, which was being filmed nearby. It also marked the reconciliation between the then 34-year-old Bertolucci and his old mentor after several disagreements following Pasolini's criticism of Last Tango in Paris in 1972 and his failure to defend it from drastic censorship measures.
Involved in this movie?
No, they just were filming stuff.
Oh, okay. Well, brought together by Salo.
Yeah, you know. During production, some reels were stolen and the thieves demanded a ransom for their return. Using doubles, the same scenes were reshot but from a different angle. At the trial of Pasolini's murder, it was hypothesized that Pasolini was told the film reels were discovered in Ostia Lido. He was led there by Pelosi, the accused, and fell victim to an ambush where he died. I don't have enough time to get into the Pasolini murder, which is a whole.
I didn't know Pasolini was murdered.
Dude, yeah, it was a political assassination as yet unsolved.
Shit.
Pasolini was undecided on what type of conclusion the film should have, to the point of having conceived and shot 4 different endings. The first was a shot of a red flag in the wind with the words "Love You," but it was abandoned by the director because he thought it too pompous and prone to the ethics of psychedelic youth, which he detested. The second showed all the actors.
Hated hippies. This just in.
The second showed all the actors, other than the 4 gentlemen. The director and his troupe perform a wild dance in a room of the villa furnished by red flags, and the scene was filmed with the purpose of using it as a background scene during the credit, but was discarded because it appeared in the eyes of Pasolini chaotic and unsatisfactory. Another final scene discovered years later, which was only in the initial draft of the script, showed after the tortures end, the 4 gentlemen walk out of the house and drawing conclusions about the morality of the whole affair, finally keeping the idea of the dance as the summation of carnage. Pasolini chose to mount the so-called final Margarita with the 2 soldiers dancing. Salo has been banned in several countries because of its graphic portrayals of rape, torture, and murder, mainly of people thought to be younger than 18 years old. The film remains banned in several countries and sparked numerous debates among critics and censors about whether or not it constituted pornography due to its nudity and graphic depiction of sex acts. The film was rejected by the British Board of Film Censors in January 1976. It was first screened at the Old Compton Street Cinema Club in Soho, London in 1977 in an uncut form and without certification from BBFC Secretary James Furman. The premises was raided by the Metropolitan Police after a few days. A cut version prepared under Furman's supervision, again without formal certification, was subsequently screened under Cinema Club conditions for some years. In 2000, in an uncut form, the film was finally passed for theatrical and video distribution in the United Kingdom. The film was not banned in the United States and received a limited release in October 1977. It was, however, banned in Ontario, Canada. In 1994, an undercover policeman in Cincinnati, Ohio, rented the film from a local gay bookstore and then arrested the owners for pandering. A large group of artists, including Martin Scorsese and Alec Baldwin, and scholars signed a legal brief arguing the film's artistic merit. The Ohio State Court dismissed the case because the police violated the owner's Fourth Amendment rights without reaching the question of whether the film was obscene. And in 1976, the New York Times said, Salo is, I think, a perfect example of the kind of material that, theoretically anyway, can be acceptable on paper, but becomes so repugnant when visualized on the screen that it further dehumanizes the human spirit, which is supposed to be the artist's concern. On that note, let's talk about Salo.
Let's do it.
I think it's fair to say nobody has seen this.
No.
Yeah, first time.
Last time?
Probably last time. First time, last time over here.
Probably last time for me.
I was telling Zach and Andrew, you know this. I recently brought the Pasolini 101 box set from Criterion, which didn't have Salo in it. And
That's
I initially
wild to me. Why?
Well, it doesn't have a lot of his movies. The others of his movies that are currently in print by Criterion, so those would be the Trilogy of Life, and then also Salo, were not included in that. It's all his other movies.
And those have Criterion releases.
Right.
Yeah, well, a lot of his movies have had Criterion releases in the past, but are out of print now, such as like The Gospel According to St. Matthew. But I was initially like, that's too bad that Salo's not in there. But having watched it, I think I'm good not owning it. It's not going to be in heavy rotation.
I think that speaking of the distribution of this movie, it is worth noting that because the Knoxville Public Library does not have a copy of Salo for some reason.
Probably Glenn Jacobs found out about the undercover cop incident in Cincinnati. And
yeah, certainly. But we all, I believe, had to watch this movie on a website called effedupmovies.com, spelled phonetically. Which
it's there if you want to watch it.
Quality, you know.
It's actually surprised. It's good quality. It gives you subtitles, so you can hear what they're saying in between the sodomy.
Right.
I think a good place to kind of start out is I was reading. Honestly, this is a fascinating movie to like dip into the Letterboxd reviews for, because you have like the 5-4-star like people with it, and then you have like the 0.5 star, 1 star, like no star people who are just like no. And like I saw one, like the most popular review is like something along the, like, I'm paraphrasing, but like you have to get to a special level of film major to find any appreciation for this movie, which is a little flippant and dismissive. I get what they're saying.
Though I very much empathize with this person who then edited his review or their review to say, this review was years ago. My opinions on movies have changed. If you comment on this old ass review, still bitter, please move on. That
says the highest rated 8.5 review writer.
That's my life.
I know you live with that, Andrew, but I have to say it's a great bit. It's a great joke. I'd still like approve of it.
I'm glad that you enjoy it. I
really
like long since my enjoyment of that joke has faded.
But like I'll say, probably never gonna watch this again. I don't really necessarily. I mean, I guess it's great that I got the chance to watch it. Sure. I feel like after reading a bunch of stuff, like I understand what it is. I found a little bit more appreciation for it, where it's just like, yeah, it fucking is awful to watch, but that's kind of the point. It's not supposed to be joyful to watch. I get that, and I think a lot of the criticism to it, where it's just like, this is just torturous. It's like, yeah, I think actually Seth had I really liked Seth's review for it, where he's just like, that's kind of like it's wanting you to react that way. Like that's what it's asking you to do. And so on that level, I think I get it. But yeah, I don't really know where I sit on it. I really don't know how I would give this a starred or whatever review.
Man. So glad I don't do star ratings anymore.
Yeah, I don't. I mean, how did y'all like? How have y'all processed the movie and like come to something on it?
I think I actually really liked this movie. But I probably won't watch it a ton. I could see myself rewatching it, but not a lot. But I think the thing that surprised me about this movie is by the end I was sad. Like I wasn't really expecting to be sad watching this movie, but it really is a bummer. And it's not a bummer. I mean, it is a bummer because of all the rape and, forced eating of human excrement and stuff like that. That's sad. like as a concept, but like the
it's
movie
more
itself,
disgusting than
yeah, it's more disgusting. But the movie itself like bummed me out. Like the final scene, which I think is really good, is these two Nazi guards talking to each other about what their girlfriends' names are, and then they're dancing to this piece as like outside the window the children are still being like tortured. And there's just something like just immensely just upsetting and like really
inhuman. Is that
it's inhuman, but it's inhuman in a way that like foregrounds the humanity. Like the fact that these Nazis are like talking about this mundane thing that's happening to the, like, oh, what was your girlfriend's name again? Oh, this was her name. And that's like the last line of the movie. And then they're like dancing, and what out of context would seem very sweet, like a moment of connection. After all this, horrible stuff has gone on, and they're just kind of like sharing a sweet like moment of camaraderie. Like I think it really emphasized to me like just what like the humanity that is lost, like what like fascism does to people is to objectify and commodify them, of course, but also like the perpetrators of fascism lose their humanity too, and they're like there's this like sense, it's like very stark, because like most of the people in this movie are either like guards who don't say anything, or these like the people who are the ringleaders who are like philosophizing the whole time, like this really abstract like high-minded philosophy as these people are being subjugated,
talking
and
about
humiliated
Nietzsche and shit.
Yeah, and then all of a sudden there's this just one mundane interaction between these two guards, and it just really bummed me out. Like just the more so than seeing anyone killed in the movie, and more so than seeing anyone debased in the movie, to me it like reinforced this idea of like the loss, like the huge grieving loss of what fascism does. Like, because I mean, I think it's a little abstract in America, not because we don't have fascists in America, but because we don't have fascism like what happened in Europe. Like what happened in Europe is that an entire generation was either destroyed because they were brutalized by fascism, or were destroyed because anti-fascists killed them. Like that was what happened in Italy. That's what happened in Germany. That's what happened across Europe. And I don't think America has had that. Like America hasn't had a lost generation because of fascism. Like we've kind of incubated fascists away from that sort of thing. But like there's a real sense of like mourning, this, these are people, but they're almost no longer people because of being caught up in either because they have become fascist, or they have become the objects of fascists' cruelty. And in both cases, like humanity is lost. And I don't know, it made me sad.
And there are a couple of moments where you do see not necessarily repentant emotion, but emotion on the part of the guards. Like in the first scene where they bring in the big dinner plate full of shit. There you can see one of the guards just like really repulsed by what is happening, but they don't do anything about it, right? And it reminds me of like the first actual act of violence that happens in the movie is a guard spits in a woman's face. I don't know if it's a guard or one of the four men who's kind of running this whole
it's like one of the soldiers, like the Nazi soldiers with him.
And the woman slaps him, and then he responds like, sorry, just following orders. And everybody kind of seizes her in that moment. Like that's the thing that you've heard a million times about the mundanity of evil, right? But it is another thing to kind of see it happen. And one thing that I have been kind of like internally debating about this movie is like whether or not you could kind of get the point of the movie without actually watching it. And I lean towards like watching it is the better option. It's not fun to watch, as we've been talking about, but I do think there's something about like the visceral experience of it that makes the point or the points sink in a little bit more. And to me, one of the things that I wasn't quite expecting about this movie, because it has such a large reputation, I was kind of expecting it to just kind of be wall to wall suffering. And it really doesn't start there. It's not until like 30 plus minutes in that the torture and the sadism gets really bad, because they spend such a long time showing this kind of formal, regal, bureaucratic process that was required to set all this up. The very first scene of the movie is just these four guys sitting around a table signing a paper, and like that is kind of the evil of it, I think, right? Like this is not a thing that people did because they just kind of went mad one day and like had this violent manic episode. They thought about it really hard. They had all these philosophical conversations whether or not this was the right thing to do, and they decided that it was, and they did the fucking paperwork that you have to do to make something like this happen. And like that kind of tension between like the refined and the depraved is like what is the most interesting about this movie to me, and how like they're able to justify depraved actions by dressing them up and calling them refined and using the philosophical language to make themselves appear dignified.
Yeah, I forgot what review I read it in, but I think one of the things that really kind of like cleared up and kind of helped me really focus on the movie and what it's saying was, one thing that the movie's really doing is less saying that like, power, like what is like pure freedom, like power brings freedom, but like what is pure freedom? And the reviews like pure freedom, as like what this movie gets at is that it's pure freedom is not just like being able to do what you want and like not having these restrictions. It's not that. It's freedom, that power brings is having the ability to then use that power to harm the people below you, and like that's what all the four main people are doing, is they are four heads of state, for lack of a better word, for this fascist Italian government, and they really engage in what like pure freedom is, and that's we have the power and we're going to use that to torture you with that power because you're helpless against it. And I think that really like gets at the point of like what's going on here.
Well, and like the fact of like at this point, like of that like pure unfettered fascism, it almost is without ideology, in the sense of at this point, where they have absolute control. There's no point in the theory of fascism anymore. It is simply like a depraved, like, I'm doing this because I'm bored and I want to see what's going to happen with that. And like, I think like there's something that this movie gets at that I've not really seen a lot of other movies about fascism get at, which is like the fundamental like emptiness of it. Like, Rebecca, one of the things that was kind of a weird thing about experiencing this movie is my wife Rebecca kind of walked in
and was like, what the hell?
Well, no, she walked in after having been out doing some stuff, and we hadn't really talked in a couple days just because we were busy and stuff. And so I paused the movie and we were talking about the like special session that the Tennessee legislature had recently had about gun law and stuff like that, which nothing ended up happening. And we were talking about like how awful and craven it was that like they would have this whole like special session in which like families of like the Covenant children who had been killed in Nashville were like begging these legislators, like, please pass something, regarding like gun reform or anything. And they barely did. There's like just a very small handful of bills that pass, and all of them are stupid and don't even like do that much good or bad. But we were just talking, and it's like, it's truly difficult to kind of understand, like, what do these legislators care about? Like, what would they say is the thing that they're trying to accomplish here? And it
Not just there, but like their broader political project.
Right? Yeah.
What's the
what
end
is
game?
What is America like? Right wing fascism. Well, fascism in America. What is its end game? I mean, it obviously is there to subjugate people and to be white supremacist or whatever. But what is truly the end game of that? And it's like the really bizarre thing is like it often doesn't even seem to be for the benefit of the fascists either. Like, these state legislators who are like just looking at these crying mothers and holding like 30-second committee meetings in which all they do is table all the bills. That's not good for them either. Like there's nothing at the core of this, like absolutely nothing. And I mean, you can say that it's like a product of capitalism and they're like beholden to the gun lobby or whatever. And, I mean, that is true to an extent, but like when you're in the act of it, like what is going through their mind? Like it just, these are just shell men, enacting like a machine that's just like bent on cruelty. And so anyway, like the movie, like the two halves of the movie kind of bookended my discussion about that with my wife. And it was like really striking to me. You don't hear the kind of like fascist ideology that you normally hear with Nazis. Like no one I don't even think Jewish people are mentioned. There's one part where they have people take off their pants to see if they're circumcised. But otherwise there's none of the race science stuff. No. There's none of the like, bizarre like fashion stuff that like, we often associate with Nazis. Like there's none of the like, they barely talk about like capitalism or communism or any of the kind of like cultural wars and economic war stuff that fascism reigned. It's like purely like now that we're in charge, we just are interested in suffering.
What are you gonna do against this? It's funny. I watched this 2 days ago, and then like yesterday, they had the clips of Mitch McConnell just zonking out for the second time in the last 6 months, which then people are now going, we should be nice to him. I'm like, no, he's a terrible, evil human being. I don't really give a shit that he's 80, whatever years old.
Yeah. But that's exactly it though. Like that, this empty man is being propped up like Weekend at Bernie'd into the Senate for nothing. Like for what? Like,
well, I was thinking about him because I'm just like, he's somebody who, at some point probably could have like, because I was thinking, I'm like, he's been doing this specific role for so long. Like, why the hell would you want to do this role? And then, like in the context of this movie, I'm thinking, well, if you were the president, you think about the president, like you're the president for 4, maybe 8 years, and then you kind of just go away. Like even now, like Obama's kind of he didn't do anything. He just pops up occasionally. What's George W. Bush doing? He
just encourages NBA strikes to end.
Yeah,
and,
he
like,
just
people to vote against Bernie. That's all.
Exactly. Yeah, he goes off and like but pretty much you're president, and then you're like, what else can I do at this point? So you just kind of go away, and it's like, well, yeah, somebody like Mitch McConnell is just pure evil. Because he's stayed in a position of power where he could lord and hold that power over things to make decisions that other people wanted to see, that he was like, no, I can strike that down. And it's like the same kind of relationship. It's just like pure power is going, I'm going to take that power and use that to, put you in your place. And like, I think that's like, pretty kind of the essence of what this movie is saying. And I'm like, yeah, like that's why he stayed in this role to the point that now he's like, zooting out of press conferences and being propped up, because he's got more pure power than, Joe Biden does right now. Yeah. So it's just like, that's why you stay there.
I don't know if I can say with any certainty what was going on in McConnell's mind when he was at his sharpest, though I do wonder, like, if he was a true like ideological fascist, like why was he not a more ardent supporter of Trump, from the jump? But what we're trying to get to the heart of, like, well, what do we think motivates fascism? I do want to remind folks of the headline cycle of the Republican Representative Madison Cawthorn saying that the DC is full of cocaine orgies.
Hell yeah.
Because that's kind of the hypothesis that Pasolini proposes in this movie, right? He kind of presents fascists as people who are driven purely by this desire to dominate, and like a depraved kink that they have just to enjoy the actual suffering of other human beings. And there was a quote in the movie that I wrote down because I thought it was kind of key. One of the central fascist says, "It is when others are degraded that I rejoice, knowing it is better to be me than the scum of the people. Whenever men are equal, without that difference, happiness cannot exist. So you wouldn't aid the humble, the unhappy. In all the world, no voluptuousness flatters the senses more than social privilege." And I've also heard it said that like the key difference between the right and the left politically is like one is interested in maintaining hierarchy and one is interested in flattening hierarchy. And thinking about it in that way, like a far right fascist is somebody who just like gets off on the idea of being at the top of the hierarchy. And he says that quote in the movie while all the prisoners are being forced to beg for food like dogs, and they're eating out of bowls and eating off the ground and things like that. And like that does seem to be on one level like a possible end game of fascism, right? Just like completely dehumanizing and degrading people just for the sake of the people who aren't being dehumanized and degraded feeling like they're superior to the others.
And like, I mean, there's like stuff in the movie too that, I mean, I think one thing that Pasolini films usually are really like bullish about is that fascism and capitalism and consumerism and kind of bourgeois morality and like bourgeois sexuality, like those are all intrinsically linked. Like that's something that's like throughout his films, is this like, idea. Cause like he is like a communist, like, people can talk about like Godard and stuff like that being like a left-wing guy. And like, I mean, that's all true in theory, but like Pasolini was like boots on the ground, like, actively fighting for like revolution, and like his death was like a political assassination and things like that. And like he was very, very dedicated to the idea that like even though like quote unquote fascism had been defeated in Italy, the ruling class of Italy was functionally indistinguishable from fascism because it still served the same machine.
Right.
And I think that like one of the things that's kind of interesting in this movie is that like you have all these kind of like allegorical stuff, like the kids like being forced to eat shit and then shitting and then being forced to eat that, like this kind of like cycle of like what's the term, coprophagia or whatever, and like that being like a metaphor for like consumerism and capitalism, because that's what capitalism does, is it like feeds upon everything until it only can like devour itself, like, so like, in America, we're at the stage of fascism now where like there is very little like common good, or like the commons are, long since gone in America for the most part. And so what capitalism is doing is devouring capital, like, and devouring other companies, or like, the environment, all that capitalism can do to the environment is devour the environment until there's no environment left and is all just like turned into shit. And like the fact of this movie, like openly like equating that with fascist suffering, I think is like really sobering, that like the machine of, basically the framework of like Western Europe and like its tradition can only like, drive toward this outcome. Like they're talking about Nietzsche. This is adapted from a like half finished novel that a dude wrote in the Bastille in like the 1700s. Like it is like Pasolini is like really interested in like, there's just like fascism and all the suffering that fascism creates has continuity with the entire project of like European liberal democracy and all that sort of stuff. Like he's very like interested in that, and like this movie like really like put your face in it in a way that like even more so than his other films do. Like it's all like part of this awful experience is like the fact that this kind of kind of bourgeois lifestyle is fascism and causes the same suffering as fascism.
The kind of curious, we've talked about what the four, heads of state kind of represent. You also have these four women who one of them is persistently, like, she tells like one story, I think, but is persistently like playing the piano while these stories are being told. But you have these four women who, for the most part, like, are aligned with the four heads of state, but are like, their mode in this whole operation is to tell these like erotic tales that usually instigate a lot of the the violence and sodomy and such that you see.
And they're usually tales of subjugation and degradation, abuse.
Yeah, because at least one of them was in sex work, and so like she'll like recount, here's what happened to me, and then they'll do it to the kids.
Right.
Yeah, well, and like, the first story, it's like, the whole point is to just, feed off of every dirty detail of it in order to kind of like instigate this stuff. So it's it's just kind of this mode of, we would I would classify them as part of the fascist regime, but at the same time, they're definitely like, again, in terms of like power, like, they're definitely a level down from the heads of state, but at the same time aren't the level of the teenagers who are in there.
Yeah, I wonder what the history of those characters is. I mean, obviously we can't know, but it seems like the movie is asking us to ponder like how these women came to have the relationships that they have with the heads of state guys, and because they're older, they seem like they have some sort of a sexual history with the men. I wonder if maybe like they were once victims of these men and have found a way to survive in it by deciding to like it. Like, there's one dude, one of the prisoners, who it seems like his strategy is, I'm just going to act like I like everything, and they're going to like me even more for that, and maybe not kill me and not like actually harm me. But I don't know.
I mean, to me, Ezra Pound is mentioned at one point in this, and like, it made me think of, there's also a bunch of like modern art and stuff you can see in the background, and it made me think of how closely tied like a bunch of like artists were with like kind of fascism. Like Ezra Pound had a lot of fascist sympathies. Some of the like high modernist literary writers had like some connections with fascism and stuff like that, and like, it's just there's a very disconcerting connection with like a lot of people who a generation prior were kind of bohemian and like on the outskirts of like what social acceptability was ended up aligning themselves with fascism, at least like in the build up to World War II. I don't, it kind of changed once the war broke out, but it kind of made me think of that, like how there are like collaborators with fascism who either as a sense of out of a sense of utility or survival instinct, or out of a like a kind of complacency, either embrace or become like kind of jesters to the fascist court, like really bizarrely. So like P.G. Wodehouse, who wrote like the Jeeves like stories, if you ever read those, like that dude like repped Nazis, like seemingly like as a useful idiot, and like just the lineage of people who were entertainers and artists who were fascist collaborators or provided like artistic work for fascists is really upsetting, because there are a lot of names that we recognize. I don't know. That's what it made me think of when I like saw those, heard the women telling those stories.
That makes sense, because they are the storytellers. That's kind of their role.
Any I guess, kind of to a degree, wrapping up, any final thoughts on Salo? I mean, we've talked through all of this. Like that's kind of where I've talked myself through the last couple days since watching it. It's definitely, I wouldn't recommend it unless you like really want to. I'm probably not gonna watch it again. But at the same time, like reading this stuff and reading these perspectives on it and kind of thinking more deeply about it, um, I don't think it definitely is a provoking movie that is doing a lot of this very depraved, disgusting, these violent acts to provoke you. Like it's definitely not a movie that's not just kind of just trying to just be oh, we're just saying this and this. No, like it's trying to provoke you, but at the same time I understand why it's trying to provoke me, and it's not for nothing. It's not just like he's doing it just to be like Pasolini clearly is a little bit of a little perv, but at the same time like I
100%.
understand like I understand why he's doing it. And so it's a movie that like I think is complicated, but at the same time like I think I agree with you, Michael, like has a message about fascism that I think is much more clear and nuanced and fascinating than a lot of other movies about it, because it very much is about, like we've talked about, like there is this banality to evil, and we want it to be like something like Hollywood storybook. You look at people reacting to the indictments in Fulton County with Trump and others, like they want it to be like this Hollywood storybook, like we got evil this time, and you're like, it's probably not going to be that way. We don't know what's going to happen, but it's probably not going to feed what you're looking for. Like evil is just mediocre and banal and just boring. And
even though in that mugshot he's definitely trying to present Hollywood evil.
Well, that's the wild thing is like you have like the kind of Law and Order, like we got him folks who want it to be a movie, and then you have Donald Trump himself who wants it to be a movie. Like and fascism has this just like weird like
there's
aesthetic,
a performativity
like
to it.
performative aspect to it, like the obsession with aesthetic is very weird and disconcerting.
But I mean my main point is just that like I think that this movie captures like that to a degree in a way that I think a lot of movies don't. And so it's not something that people are going to actively want to watch over and over and over again necessarily. But I do think that even though it's like described as like, oh, like again, like we watched on fedupmovies.com, it is this like, prolifically disgusting, depraved movie that people talk about. But I'm just saying that there's more to the depravity than just being gross. I don't think it's just one that's just being gross to be gross.
No, definitely not.
And so I appreciate it more than just going in where I'm just like, we're just going to suffer for 2 hours and watch this thing.
Now, I have a question for you, Michael. Zach alluded to Pasolini being a little perv. And I know that you've seen a lot more Pasolini movies than we have. And I'm curious, like, how he generally treats sex in his movies. Because, like, I can't imagine this movie being made by somebody who doesn't have, like, an intimate familiarity with kink, right? And, like, surely he is not a sex-negative person as a general rule, right?
He is not. In fact, the 3 movies he made before this are what gets packaged by Criterion as his trilogy of life, which are like adaptations of the Decameron, Canterbury Tales, and then the Arabian Nights. And all of those are very sex positive. Like, for instance, the Decameron ends with the scene, and I don't know if this is in the original Decameron or not, but his adaptation of the Decameron ends with the scene in which this dude dies. These like devout, like Catholic people, have kept chaste their entire lives and are not going to have sex until they're married and all this sort of stuff. And this dude dies and comes back and as a ghost, and the guy's like, well, how's heaven? And he's like, it's great. And he's talking about all this stuff. And he's like, do they talk about, sexual sins or whatever? And he's like, no, God doesn't care about all that. And then the guy, movie ends like with the guy like running through the streets being like, it's okay, I can have sex. And like, so, like there is like a real sex positivity throughout his films, and like Pasolini was gay, which is another thing too, is that a lot of his films do involve like like either queer coded or explicitly queer sexuality, and like also like a real interest in like the kind of scatological elements of just like bodily functions as well, like which is a really good fit for like Canterbury Tales and the Decameron and the Arabian Nights. But there's also, I think there's an acute sense of like sex as power play as well. There's a really good film of his called Theorem. The English language title is Theorem, which involves like people basically having sex with God incarnate at the beginning of the movie, and then that like changing their lives in ways that are both good and bad. And then there's another film called, oh, what is it called? Well, even as in his Arabian Nights adaptation, there's a lot of like sexual dynamics that are like women subjugated into harems and that sort of thing that are like, you know, troubling in terms of like their sexual dynamics as well. And, you know, some people could say that this is a product of the time or whatever, but like he does play around with like kind of young actors being nude, which is like disconcerting, especially in Arabian Nights. There's a lot of like imagery of like sexual imagery of people who are like clearly very young, like, which is kind of gross, I think. So anyway, like, yeah, so his films are like suffused with sexuality, but it's a pretty wide spectrum of it. And I think I think in a lot of ways he viewed sex as liberatory, but also understood the ways that like sexual mores could be inhibiting and like a function of like the kind of like fascist like bourgeois machine.
Yeah, because this movie definitely seems to be like to acknowledge very honestly that like when people are given total freedom to do whatever they want, like they're going to pursue sexual pleasure because like humans seek pleasure and sex feels good, right? But it is when that like desire for pleasure is kind of compounded with this really insidious desire to actually subjugate and harm other people in order to make oneself more powerful, that you know, you get something like what happens in Salo.
There's a really disturbing part, like one of the earlier instances of like the kind of like sadism in Salo involves them picking two teens to get married, and then consummate the marriage in front of everybody, but then are not allowed to actually consummate the marriage because then they're ripped off each other and then separately raped by the older men. And like there is something about like that as like an allegorical thing about like what is a marriage, and like we have marriage as this kind of idealized like, you know, joining of families or like you know, lifelong love or that sort of thing, but that is corrupted by marriage as also being an extension of the state, and or marriage
like
being an
possession.
Marriage being an extension of possession, or marriage being an extension of like these kind of like property values, you know. When families are joined, like there is like historically like a financial or property connection between those families as well that like ties marriage into like a kind of capitalist economy in a way that, you know, makes it very impure in terms of like, you know, love. And I think that there's like a keen awareness of that in these movies. I don't know though. I mean, I think Pasolini seems to be working through some sexual stuff too. He has an Oedipus Rex adaptation, which I think I talked about on this podcast once, but Oedipus Rex is of course a very troubled story with regards to sexuality, because you're whoops, like I killed my dad and now I'm having sex with my mom by accident. And you know, you don't make an adaptation of that. And also like putting biographical details in the movie, like Pasolini's dad was in Mussolini's army, and he basically puts that into the Oedipus Rex film. And you don't make a movie like that and then have parts of your own biography in it if you're not also kind of like trying to work through some
for sure
sexual stuff. It seems that went unresolved by the time he was murdered.
Wow. Yeah. Well, unrelated, but I guess my last point would be just that I was surprised to be surprised by the end of this movie. I think that you kind of know what it's going to be going in because the reputation precedes it. But after watching an hour and 45 minutes of it, I felt a little numb to the violence and the suffering on screen. But I was shocked again by how intense the violence of the last scene.
Wow, yeah, that
was.
is very intense.
I would have preferred not to see some of that, and did look away from a lot of it. But ultimately, I am glad that I watched this movie, and I do think that, like Zach said, it has something to say, and it is not just shock value for the sake of shock value. So yeah, I guess I am a mild pro Salo voice,
as much as you can be, you know.
Yeah.
Well, like we've said, Salo, it's in Criterion. I didn't watch it on the Criterion channel, but
it's not on the Criterion channel. I discovered
you can watch it on fedupmovies.com.
Maybe the best place to watch it. Like Andrew and I went through a whole journey of trying to like find a subtitled version of this film.
I found like there's like 4 versions on the Internet Archive, but none of them were subtitled. So then I was like, I tried, and F'd Up Movies, the principal sponsor of this episode,
doing the Lord's work.
Yeah, I will say that last time, whenever we had the podcast on Pink Flamingos, that's where I watched Pink Flamingos too, is fedupmovies.com.
Wow.
So
exactly. Sponsor us, fedupmovies.com.
They're not choosing to, but fedupmovies.com sponsor this episode. Well, that'll wrap up this episode of Cinematary. You can find us on Facebook at facebook.com/Cinematary, on Twitter and Instagram at handle at Cinematary, and on Letterboxd at letterboxd.com/Cinematary. Definitely be following us on Twitter and Instagram. This will be going live on September 1st. Andrew and I will be in Toronto the following week, covering the Toronto Film Festival as we do every year. So perfect time to follow us on those 2 platforms, where we will be posting thoughts, quick reviews, stuff like that from the festival. But thank you, big thank you to our patrons. If you'd like to support the show, patreon.com/Cinematary. We love anybody who shows some support. Thank you to Cam, Candace Sisson, Ron Hayes, Teresa Marsati, and Tyler Chandler for supporting the show. Next week we will be concluding our Young Critics Watch Old Movies series with 1982's Fast Times at Ridgemont High, which I feel like
more teens in uncomfortable situations.
Yeah,
it's the same movie
in a way.
I hope it's not the same movie.
Until then, thanks for listening. We'll see you next week.
Bye. We did it, y'all.